Hi there, YouTube. So I'm back. This is only probably the second or third video that I'm doing, but it's something that came up in the comments, and we were talking about environment variables. I thought maybe I should make a dedicated video about environment variables in Node.js specifically. So yeah, I added a little thingy here at the top, what's it, top left, top right, that you can actually see what I look like and who I am. But anyway, I digress. Let's get straight to it. So environment variables are important when you need to keep certain information secret to whoever's running your application, and not put it in the code itself. Something like a password to access a database, or an API key that if you need to talk to a third-party API or something like that. You don't want to actually store those values in code because they might change, and then you would have to update your entire code base or redeploy or whatever, but by making code changes. And it's just not the right way to do it. The right way is to extract that information to an environment type thing. So you have an environment, and your application relies on whatever the environment gives it to function. Like I said, something like a password to a database username as well, or an API key or whatever. So in this very short video, I'm going to focus on just a few small things. First being reading raw environment variables, and then instead of using them from the command line, using a file, like a .env file. And then if you don't want to use .env but use a different file name, how can we change that name and location? And then last but not least, what do you need to avoid with .env files? So as you can see, this is a GitHub URL. I'll put this in the description of the video as well, which, by the way, please like and subscribe to the video. It helps me grow the channel. But yeah, I assume that you know what Node.js is and you have it installed, you know some JavaScript, you know the basics of running a Node app, and you know what Git is and what it's used for. Anyway, so I set up a little project. Only thing I've really changed in this package JSON is that I made it a type module, so I can use a nice import syntax. And then also I've set up a dev script, which I probably won't use in this, we'll see. But that's it. Other than that, it's just a stock standard npm init file. And then the README file that I just showed you. So this is the second time I've done it. This little box that you have on your screen that has my face in it was in the wrong place the previous time. And all these commands that I were running in the bottom right here were under the little window, which is just stupid. So maybe from this point forward, I'm going to change it and take myself out of the picture, so we know we're not covering anything up that we shouldn't. Okay, so let's clear this and start from scratch. So as you can see here, I set up the script to use index.js. So let's create an index.js file, index.js, and console log just hello YouTube. Well, wrong character. Now we can say npm run dev, and it will run this dev script that I have here. It says hello YouTube. If I change something like that, it will automatically run it again. I'm not going to do it that way though. I'm going to run the application node index.js because you'll see why just now. Okay, so the first raw way to pull in environment variables, and this works fine. You don't need to use any packages. This works fine if you don't write a very complex application. The first way to do it is to just say, like, create a variable that references whatever it is that you want to store. So let's say a port number. You're running some kind of a web server and you want to be able to specify the port that's part of your environment. You just say const port, and remember, it's a good idea for things like this to make them capitals. It's easier to spot config type variables that way. Just say process.env. So process refers to the process that executes this node script, and .env is an object with some information about the environment that it's running on. And we can say port. Okay, so let's change the message here to say server running on port, and use string interpolation to write that out. Okay, so if we say node index.js server running on port undefined, which makes sense because we did not specify the port. We need to actually give it a value. And the way you would do that is just to say port equals, and what port should we use? 1234. And then you run the script, index.js. There we go. Server running on port 1234. And there you have it. That's actually the crux of it. That's how you get environment variables into your application. But obviously this can get out of hand. So let me show you why. So let's say we add another one, an API key. Process.env.api key. And let's add another one. We say db user equals process.env.db user. And another one saying db parse equals process.env.db parse. Okay, so now if you run this again, okay, we obviously need to add some more logging as well. So we can say API, I'm not going to write like sentences here, API key, database user is db user, database password is db pass. Save. If we run this again, okay, they're still undefined. Now look at this. If we start typing in our port equals 1234, and then API key equals AABBCZ whatever that might be. db user equals my user name, my db username. db underscore parse equals my db parse. And then only do we get to node and index.js, not ks, js. Again, this works, but can you see the problem here? This starts getting out of hand relatively quickly. So the right way to do this would be to write some kind of code, and I'm not going to do that in this session. If you want me to, let me know in the comments and we can do a video on it. But write some kind of code that actually checks whether the things are set and then pass them in via whatever script mechanism you use to fire up your application. So maybe in here specify everything that needs to be specified and so on. But that again becomes a problem, which I'll touch on later. So a different way to do this, and this, I mean, the only time when you will actually fire up stuff like this continuously over and over is when you're doing development, right? You might want to change the port because you're running something on 1234 already or something like that. So you're going to run these things over and over, but with different values. Then you might actually want to set up a file in your directory structure that you can just put these values in and know what they are, specific to your environment, and just run them. So that's what we'll do next. So the package we'll use is called npm.js. Not npm, it's from npm.js, and it's called .env. And this does exactly what I just explained. So you create a .env file in the root directory of your project, and you specify things like this. Let's do that. npm install .env. All right, we've added the package. Remember, I changed this to a type module earlier, so I can do import statements without Visual Studio complaining. Here, import .env from .env. And then you say .env.config. And what that will do is take anything that it finds in a .env file and add that onto the .env object. And it only does that if it's not specified on the command line or in the environment already. So what I mean by that is, let's say we have an env file that only has those two values. Copy file .env. So let's make this something we will recognize. So 1111 and z. Okay, so now if we run this like we did, the values are still what they were previously that we specified on here. But if we actually take out the API key and run it like that, now you can see it's actually what we have in this file, .env file. So Server is now running on 111 ZZZ, but the database user and database parse is still coming from the command line. Just for simplicity's sake, I'm actually going to bring this over to the file as well. Like that. And now we can just say node index.js, and we still have everything. Just to emphasize that, you can see it actually took it over like that. Okay, so that's working. And you could probably stop at this point again, but I want to show you some more. The next item on our agenda was using a custom name and or location for the env file. So maybe you don't want to call it .env, you want to call it something else. I typically use the name local.env in my projects. So if I run this now, everything is undefined again because it doesn't know it needs to look at local.env. So if we go back to this config function has a constructor that takes in an object of which one property is path, and we can just say there local.env, save it. If we run it again, boom, there we go. So now we've specified our file. So yeah, that's kind of it. The last thing I want to add on is what to avoid with .env files. First thing is, don't push them to your source control repository to Git or whatever it is you're using. Now for Git specifically, the way you would do that is to create a .gitignore file if you don't have one already, and then specify what files you don't want to add to the source control. In my case, it would then be local.env. If I save that, you'll see after a while it goes gray. And then something else, make this like best practice for yourself. Always include node modules itself as well. Otherwise you push all the code or the packages you use up to Git as well. You see that goes gray as well. So if I say git status now, you'll see I don't have node modules, I don't have local.env as some of the files that's been picked up. That's the one thing. The other thing is, do create an example file for your developers. You're typically working on, or people typically are working on in groups of people. You push the code, tomorrow somebody else pulls it, they need to know what to do, how do they set up their local environment. Please either use your README file to explain exactly what it is that your application needs, what the typical values for that would be, or just create a copy of your whatever file it is that you're using and rename it to whatever it should be called, and add something like exm or example at the back, and just take out the actual values and make it sample values like redacted or something like that. DB username, your DB user, or DB parse, something like that. And actually do add that to Git, but don't add the actual file that you're using in your local environment to Git. And with that, I must say, I think that wraps it up. If you've got any questions, please throw them out in the comments. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and check back for more videos in the future. Thanks. Take care.